Hello everyone, welcome to John Redmann, Power of Attorney, the show that aims to empower you through knowledge of the law. I'm attorney John Redmann.
And hello everyone, I'm Shauna Sanford. Welcome to the show. Well, if you are ever ticketed or arrested on the West Bank, then chances are pretty good that you will have to appear before a judge in 2nd Parish Court in Jefferson Parish. Over the next 2 weeks, we'll take a close look at the role parish courts play in our court system, and in particular, what happens when it comes to traffic and misdemeanor cases, as well as small business and personal injury claims.
The man who will help guide our discussion is Judge Roy M. Cascio. He was in private practice, then worked at the parish attorney's office in Jefferson Parish up until 1995. Since then, Judge Cascio has served with distinction in Jefferson Parish Second Court for 18 years. He is well respected, and we are thrilled to have him help us demystify what goes on in his court and others like it.
Well, we had a chance to chat with Judge Cascio a little bit earlier. He's a very interesting person, and he has lots to share with us. You have practiced before his court. You've practiced in several courts, all the way up to the Supreme Court. Tell us, what sort of role parish courts play in our judicial system?
Well, let me tell you, from the parish courts where a lot of business gets taken care of, all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which it's an honor for me to have even gotten that high in a case. It's the front grounds of litigation. In other words, many cases never get to the courthouse. Most cases are settled without ever having to file a lawsuit. But in parish courts such as this, and they're called city courts in other parishes across the state, they're limited jurisdiction. But in civil cases such as I handle, personal injury, you're there for that. It's also limited jurisdiction as far as crimes go. So misdemeanor cases as opposed to felonies, they're handled there for the most part, with some exceptions. It's going to be a really good discussion because so much happens in these courts, and there's a lot you can learn about what to do if you find yourself sitting in that courtroom waiting for your case to be called.
And Judge Cascio is going to help us learn a lot more about it. When we return, Judge Roy Cascio sheds light on what the general public may not know about important courtroom procedures and the kinds of claims he hears day in and day out. Stay with us. Hello everybody, welcome back to the show. If you ever find yourself in a parish courtroom, there are some important things you should know about how the system operates. And today we have a very special guest who will give us an inside look at how things work in his courtroom.
Joining us is the Honorable Roy M. Cascio, one of 2 judges presiding at 2nd Parish Court in Jefferson. The other is Judge Raylan Beavers, who was recently elected. Welcome, Judge, and thanks so much for joining us again for a continuing conversation about what goes on in parish courts and what they call city courts in other areas. Judge, so getting into the conversation, and well, this is the first segment of 2 we're going to cover. Why don't you define for us what is the area that your court covers, and generally what types of cases do you cover?
Okay. Well, we're a lower jurisdiction court, and our area is the West Bank of Jefferson Parish. We go from the Mississippi River to the Gulf of Mexico, from the Orleans Parish line to the St. Charles Parish line. We handle misdemeanors, civil suits under $20,000, and then we handle most of the traffic on the West Bank of Jefferson Parish. Now, the traffic is, a lot of it is from the parish areas. We do get few cases from the cities, but the cities handle their own mostly.
And when you say that you're a lower jurisdiction, is it that that monetary amount that defines lower jurisdiction?
In the civil context, it's the monetary amount of $20,000. In the criminal context, it's like in theft cases, it's under $500.
Okay.
And also the lower jurisdiction, because we handle just misdemeanors, that means generally the maximum sentence is 6 months.
Okay, no felonies.
Yeah, and just to sort of flesh that out a little bit, in the civil context, we're talking about somebody gets hurt in a car accident and they make a claim for their injuries against the insurance of the other driver, or against the other driver, or maybe it's one person suing somebody else, or a business suing another business for money that's alleged owed, or a breach of contract, as long as the claim is not as long as the claim is less than $20,000 per person or per business that's involved.
Correct, yes. Yeah. What we do, and we didn't mention it of our conversations, we handle a lot of the code enforcement cases for the parish.
That's important.
And we've gotten a lot of them since Katrina. They're starting to slow down now. But,
And so for the layman out there, when you talk about code enforcement,
okay.
what are you talking about?
like if you didn't repair your house after Katrina, or you don't keep up your house on a regular basis, your gutters are falling down, you've got broken windows, and you just put a board up on your window, you don't cut your grass in your yard, stuff like that. Those are code enforcement, because it's the Jefferson Parish code that governs those things.
Right. So if you live, for Second Parish Court in Jefferson Parish, if you live anywhere on the west bank of Jefferson Parish, and the parish of Jefferson says you have violated a code, they believe you have violated one of the codes regarding your building, your home, maybe one of your rental properties, a business, you're not keeping it up properly, maintaining it properly, that would be litigated in a court such as yours.
Correct.
Okay. And if you're on the East Bank, it would be First Parish Court for Jefferson Parish.
Yes, First Parish Court is very similar. We have the same jurisdictional amounts. It's just they handle everything on the East Bank of Jefferson Parish.
It's kind of a geography thing. East
Correct.
Bank of the river versus West Bank of the river.
Yeah.
Something else very interesting that you pointed out is that there are only 3 parish courts in the entire state.
Correct. First Parish is a separate court, so it's First Parish, Second Parish, and then there's Ascension Parish Court.
And then throughout the rest of the state, there are city courts, right?
Correct.
Yeah, but there's a big difference between city court and parish court.
In a sense, yeah, a lot of the city courts have part-time judges, whereas the parish courts have to have full-time judges. And a little more, they have their own marshal's or sheriff's office that they manage, and clerk's office. In the parish courts, we have to use the clerks that were elected for the district courts in Jefferson Parish, it's John Guggenheimer. And then we have to use the sheriff's office to issue subpoenas or take out subpoenas and serve them and collect the monies, whereas in most of the other city courts, they all use their own people, they hire their own people.
Right. So for example, in Orleans Parish, they don't have a parish court, they have a city court. They have a couple of city courts.
Correct.
And they have city courts on the West Bank, on the East Bank as well, because Orleans Parish, like Jefferson, is on both sides of the river.
Correct, yeah.
And but serving subpoenas and so forth, subpoenas for those people who maybe they don't already know this, subpoenas are what people in a lawsuit or in a case by the city or the parish against somebody who's violating a code, or it's a criminal case. Subpoenas are what tell people to show up to court or to produce documents or whatever that the court or maybe a litigant, somebody in the lawsuit, is requesting. Correct?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Great.
So, Judge, you've been on the bench for quite some time now. It's old hat to you. You go in there day in and day out. But for someone who is not used to the court system, when they come into your courtroom, what is it that they're going to see? What are they going to find? Is it like they see on television?
Well, I guess the courtroom's set up because you have the judge's bench and you have your court reporter and a witness stand. But other than that, it's a lot more formal in the real court systems. Mm-hmm. We don't have a lot of... And I'm confused. See, in Jefferson Parish, we have also justice of the peace courts, and they're not courts of record. And they usually, when they hear a case, it's a conversation similar to what we're having. When you come into the parish courts or the district courts, now all the rules of the code apply. Whatever the civil code rules are, that's what we follow. So your entire, you can't use hearsay testimony, meaning you can't say things other people have said, mm-hmm. and you just have to be a lot more formal. And
no juries, though, right?
And no juries in Second Parish Court. The lower jurisdiction courts, all the city courts and parish courts were prohibited from hearing jury trials.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And that's actually can work to many people's advantage if, for instance, and we can go into this to some extent. If you don't have a jury and it's always a judge trial, things tend to move a lot more efficiently, because with a jury you have to do a whole lot more steps in order to have a trial. Correct?
Correct. First off, you don't know how long it'll take to pick a jury. Sometimes it may take a day, 2 days to pick a jury before you even get started in the trial.
That's because when you're picking a jury, each side gets to ask a lot of questions about
Correct.
where you're from, just to figure out if somebody's biased or if they have family members who work for insurance companies or family members who work in the criminal justice system. So all that stuff takes a lot of time.
Correct.
And then there's motions filed long before the trial date regarding jury issues, information that the jury should or should not be allowed to hear. And you're talking about that kind of stuff too, right?
Correct. That takes up a lot of time, and so usually we just bypass all of that. If you're ready to go to trial, when we set your trial date, you come in, you're ready, we get right down to business with the trial.
So the dockets move fairly quickly.
They generally move a lot quickly.
Yeah, and so can you give us some idea for those of us who are not in the court system all the time? What's quick?
Well, quick, I'm not talking about quick from the time you file your suit, because then you have time for the other side to have to answer. Then you have to see if anybody's going to file any discovery. But from the time you file your request for a trial date, you're looking at about 3 months, sometimes maybe 4, but generally around 3 months.
Yeah, and John, as an attorney, that's pretty attractive.
Yeah, and we should let people know that as an attorney, when let's say you're a trial attorney, such as I am, you don't get paid unless you're successful for your injured client. And if your case takes years before you get to trial, then you have a lot of time invested in your case. Generally, the trial attorney has to spend money on doing what you call discovery. And
Correct.
for the uninitiated, that means taking depositions, sending out written questions to the other side, and that can take a good while. Now, if I know that I'm in a court such as yours, where your docket moves more quickly than in other courts because there's less logistical concerns with the jury. You've got a lot more logistical concerns. Lawyers make decisions what witnesses are going to call and how much is going to be said in front of a jury, as opposed to an experienced trial judge. Then there's a lot of attractiveness to going to a parish court judge or a city court judge. The big decision, though, is my case going to be worth more than your jurisdictional amount? Is there enough insurance money to make that call? And that's what I'm sure you see when lawyers go before you. Maybe you might see a case where the injuries look severe, but why are they in front of you, and what do they tell you?
Yeah, we discuss that all the time with the attorneys as they come in, and especially in Jefferson Parish, since we're a lower jurisdiction court, and we have the same powers as a district court, only to a lesser degree. If you file in second parish or first parish court, and you think your claim was only worth $15,000 to $20,000, and as the months roll on, you find out there's some other problems, and now it may be a $50,000 or $75,000 case. There's no problem to file a motion to have it transferred to the district courts.
Right.
So it's a decision you can. Right. That decision can be made.
That's an excellent point, and I hadn't covered that. A lawyer, let's say, who files a claim in your court early on in the case, it's within a year you have to file a suit. Let's say examples of car accident case. If the person is still in treatment, they're not getting better, and lo and behold, the doctor says, well, this is a more serious injury. We've discovered that this back injury is more serious. It might even need an operation. And the lawyer discovers, well, the doctors tell the lawyer and the patient it's more serious. Then the lawyer can actually come back to the court and say, now, after I filed the lawsuit, I've learned more medically about the patient, and it's a bigger value case, and they can actually sort of go to a higher value court, correct?
Correct.
And actually, I'm going to have to ask you to hold that thought because we have to take a quick break. We're going to get to your answer on the other side. When we come back, we will also take your questions for Judge Cascio, so stay with us. Hello everyone, welcome back. Judge Roy Cascio is our guest, and we're talking about how different claims are handled in his Jefferson Parish courtroom and some things you really should know about how Parish Court operates. We have several viewer questions, and we're going to get to those in just a few moments, but Judge, I know that you wanted to finish answering John's question.
And just, yes, to finish John's question, there are some times people in Second Parish Court whose claims may be right over $20,000, maybe $30,000, but the insurance is only $15,000 to $20,000. So that's another factor that the attorneys or the people have to add into. I want to just stay because I'm not going to get anything more at the most than the insurance amount of money. So those are decisions that attorneys and individuals have to make when they're not represented by attorneys.
Thank you. Good.
Okay, all right. So we're going to jump into our viewer questions, and our first one comes from Carolyn. She says, what is the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony? Does it have anything to do with the dollar amounts and limits? And Judge, there may be some confusion about this out there.
Well, because misdemeanors and felonies, generally with the misdemeanors, your maximum sentence that you could be sentenced to is 6 months in parish prison. However, the code defines it as anything that you cannot be sentenced to hard labor. So if it just says you're sentenced to 6 months and that's it, it's basically a misdemeanor. If it says 6 months with or without hard labor, then it becomes a felony. But I don't believe there's any felonies with 6 month sentences. I think they all start at a year or more.
Okay.
So, but 6 months is what we look at as a guideline. And in regards to the dollar amounts, there are limits with the misdemeanors. Like theft charges is a maximum of $500. It has to be
These are
under
the fines
$500.
that come along with or without jail time, right?
Correct. Most of the sentences are so much a dollar amount of a fine and or so many days or months in parish prison. And that's where the 6 months, some of the sentences are 3 months or 9 months or 3 months or 90 days or 6 months.
And just to bookend what you said earlier, your court only handles misdemeanor cases.
Correct.
If it's a felony, it's going to be handled in 24th Judicial District Court.
Correct.
The main courthouse in Gretna for Jefferson Parish.
Yes.
But the misdemeanor and the felony, if it's with or without hard labor,
Then it's a felony.
it's a felony.
Correct.
And that's what people need to be aware of.
And then it goes to the district court.
Okay, not so much the dollar amount. Don't get hung up on the dollar amount.
Well, no, with theft cases, bad checks, and also like simple criminal damage, but with theft cases and bad checks, it's under $500. So if you went to Dillard's or Sears or something and stole a shirt, as long as, if it's under $500, it's a misdemeanor. The legislature didn't create under $500, but make it a sentence at hard labor. Okay, so if the theft is under $500, they coordinate the sentence to make it sure it's a misdemeanor.
Oh, I see.
Okay,
I
so they
see.
would never. I've
It
never
would never
seen
be
it.
under $500 with or without hard labor.
Yeah, you wouldn't find that in the code.
Okay, but over $500.
Over $500, it would be with or without
It
hard labor.
could be with or without hard labor.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Very
So that would
important.
mean it's not a misdemeanor and not something handled in
Second parish
It would go to
court,
district
correct.
court. Okay. All right. Jay says, which offenses may I pay the fines online which require a mandatory court appearance?
Okay, we have a schedule, and the legislature has decided some things in traffic. No, misdemeanors can't be paid online. Misdemeanors, you have to come to court and plead guilty in court. But with traffic, the legislature's defined some traffic that they've required that it's a mandatory court appearance. Each individual court has defined some things not defined by the legislature that they want to be mandatory court appearances. So each court could be different with their defining of what they want to be mandatory. The legislature, those are all the courts have to have their mandatory.
Okay.
Now in Jefferson Parish, if you get a citation, well, let me just mention some of them are like passing a school bus, littering, certain things, crossing a fire hose, and there's some other as suspended driver's license charges. These are all things that the courts have required, that our court requires as mandatory. The legislature's required, like if you're more than 15 miles an hour over the speed limit, that's from the legislature. You have to make a court appearance for those things there.
And so what you require is mandatory in your courtroom or in your court, is that necessarily the same thing in first court?
Well, generally in
court?
first and second parish, we try to keep it very similar because we're dealing with the same parish, with Jefferson Parish. So I've never checked them all, but I'd say just about everyone would be very similar.
Would be very similar.
Yeah.
So folks
But
shouldn't be surprised if there are some differences.
Correct. But if you go to another parish and go to one of their city courts, it could be entirely different how they handle
And maybe
it.
a way to get the answer, if you're in another parish, and even to know for certain in Jefferson Parish, depending on the ticket, the offense, call the clerk of court, call the clerk for city or parish court, and say, can I pay this ticket online? Maybe your ticket on the back, typically it'll have a phone number you can call or a website you can go to, and you may be able to get that information right online. But if ever in doubt, if you're not certain, what do?
You show up.
You show up.
Be in court on a date you're and some people don't understand that when you sign the citation or the ticket, that's only what you're promising to appear in court on that date. It's nothing to do with whether you're guilty or innocent.
You're not admitting you're guilty by signing the ticket.
That's like your bond, because then what happens if you don't appear, after 30 days, we report it to Baton Rouge, and they suspend your driver's license. So that's really your signature.
And you
is-
can be
even more
fined
trouble
just for
if
not
you're
showing
stopped.
up, and that's a big fine.
Well,
get a block
you can
on your
be held
driver's
in
license. You
contempt.
can be held in contempt, but you don't want to have your driver's license suspended
Right.
because
Then there's
That's
more
a whole-
problems. It really
Right.
opens up a whole new ball of problems, because now you have to deal with the Department of Public Safety and not just with the court, because we send the orders to Baton Rouge, but the Department of Public Safety places the suspension.
Yeah.
And now you have to deal with the Department of Public Safety before you can come back to court to finish your court problems.
Well, I think that's very important, and I don't know if that we can stress it enough, because there may be some people who are just totally frightened by everything that's happening, and the last thing they want to do is show up because they don't know what's going to happen. But it's very important
or
that
they
you
don't
do.
want to show up because they know that they're going to be told to pay the fine, but they don't have the money.
Yeah.
And so they think if I show up and I don't have the money, I might just get arrested. And that's a big misconception, generally speaking. I mean, there may be some exceptions. But what's your advice to these people?
No, if you've got a court date that you've been ordered to court, it doesn't get any better if you do not show up for court. You should show up. I'm not familiar with any court that if you show up and you plead guilty, that if you don't have the money on you at that point in time, that they're going to hold you in contempt. Now, the courts I've talked to, we all have different type of payment plans. Some may be more liberal than others, but we all have developed payment plans that people can pay over a period of time. Some may only be 2 or 3 months, some may be 6 months, but the worst thing to do is not to show up.
Okay, well, I think we have time for maybe one more question, and then we're going to bring up some information so that people can get contact information. This is from Kurt, who says, I really don't have the funds to hire an attorney. I'm going to represent myself. What kinds of forms are available to people who want to represent themselves?
Okay, several of the city courts, and maybe even John Guggenheimer's website, Jefferson Parish, has forms on it.
Yeah, that's the clerk of court for Jefferson Parish.
Correct, John Guggenheimer's Jefferson Parish clerk of court, that you can search to look for forms. I know like Baton Rouge, and I think maybe Minden has a good set of forms. But the Supreme Court right now has a committee working on trying to centralize the forms that you can go right to the Supreme Court of Louisiana's website. And it may be another 6 or 8 months before that's complete, but they're working on that right now.
In the meantime, also, you go to the clerk's office at whatever parish you're in and ask them what forms they have. A lot of times, I know in civil district court, they have forms. In the criminal district court, I think they have a help desk. See what help you can get. You know, knock on the doors. and see
A
what
lot
answers.
a lot will help you.
Oh yeah, look, we have information on the screen now.
Correct.
So,
That
for Jefferson Parish courts.
you have Second Parish Court and First Parish Court's website, and then you have John Guggenheimer's website on there. Just wanted to point out.
Yeah, if you go to my website, the TV show website will get you to these same sites as well. But you were saying, Judge?
The big thing is that people have to understand, when you go to the clerk's office, they cannot practice law. So they're taught by their clerks, like John Guggenheimer will teach his clerks, that you can't give them advice. If you start giving advice, you're practicing law. So they can hand you the forms, and they may be able to tell you what would go in a blank or something, I'm not quite sure. But they cannot practice law and give advice as to how do you think I should proceed in this case.
Yeah, very
Those-
important information. So
Yeah.
don't get upset with them when they say we
Well,
can't, we can't advise you.
That's what happens.
yeah.
People start to get upset. but you need a law license to practice law, and giving advice on
If you
how
get the
to.
wrong advice, you could end
You
up
want
way
good
worse.
advice,
Yes.
right? Absolutely.
Yes.
Judge, we are completely out of time. Thank you so
Well,
very much. We appreciate it. But you're going to stick around. We're going to do part 2, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so very much for watching. We learned a lot today, but there is more to come on how to navigate Second Parish Court in Jefferson. So be sure to join us next week for part 2 of our conversation with Judge Cascio.
And of course, we will include you in the conversation. So start sending your questions through Facebook, email, and Twitter. Also visit our website, johnredmannpoa.com, for more information. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.